Tonyo ko for his interpretation.
Thank you, Chief. Can anybody answer questions on PhilHealth, please? Government Corporate Counsel? Hermosura, please.
Happy to answer your questions, Your Honor.
Okay, let us go to Section 11 again, the most popular provision in these discussions. Okay, Section 11 provides for what is known as the Program Reserve Fund. Before going to the details, can you give me the significance of providing a reserve fund for PhilHealth? What is the importance of having a reserve fund for PhilHealth?
As I understand, Your Honor, it's like a contingent fund.
A contingent fund for what purpose?
To address the possible lack of funding in the future.
So would you agree with me that the higher reserve fund you have, the more secure PhilHealth will be?
Yes, that's correct, Your Honor. But at the same time, the law provides a mechanism so that...
Within the mechanism provided for the actuarial?
Yes, there is also a mechanism so that the managers of PhilHealth do not become so conservative. So they cannot fix a reserve fund beyond the ceiling. There's a ceiling imposed by Section 11, Your Honor.
Okay, now let's go to Section 11. Section 11 speaks of accumulated revenues. It also speaks of reserve fund. It also speaks of current year expenditures. Can you define to me these terms?
Right now, Your Honor, there is an office order issued by the PhilHealth President in 2012 where accumulated revenues is defined to mean the accumulated income of PhilHealth. So it refers to the results of the operation of PhilHealth in past years.
When you speak of accumulated income, that is net of expenditures for that particular year?
Yes, Your Honor. So it's net.
So if it is net, and this Section 11 speaks of reserve fund to be taken from the accumulated revenues. And there's a formula under Section 11 wherein you determine the reserve fund.
It says, Section 11 says, the reserve fund, a portion of the accumulated revenues can be set aside as reserve fund, but which shall not exceed the ceiling, which is the actuarially estimated expenditures for the next 2 years.
Okay. Is it possible that the reserve fund will exceed as computed by the actuarial formula more than the accumulated revenues?
It is possible, Your Honor, but under that office order that I mentioned earlier, the reserve fund is always set as equal to the ceiling or lower than the ceiling.
Okay. The reserve fund under Section 11 is by virtue of the Universal Health Care Act, which was passed in 2019. Are you saying that prior to 2019, there is no concept of reserve fund by PhilHealth?
No, there is already a concept, Your Honor. The concept of reserve fund was actually taken from the Universal Health Insurance Act, which was passed earlier. I think that was in 1995.
Okay. Now,
yes, 1995.
the prior to Universal Health Care Act of 2019, you said that there's already a concept of reserve fund.
Yes, that's in Section 27 of the National Health Insurance Act.
Is there a
19.
formula on how you determine the reserve fund prior to 2019?
No. The Section 27 of the National Health Insurance Act also says that from the accumulated revenues, a portion can be set aside as reserve fund, Your Honor.
What I mean is the 2-year actuarial computation, the ceiling.
That is the ceiling, yes.
Is that also present prior to 2019?
That is also in the law prior to 2019, Your Honor.
Okay. Now, for 2024, how much was the reserve fund?
2024. I think the board approved a reserve fund of 280 billion, Your Honor.
280
billion, more or less.
280 billion.
Yes. And
At the time, how much was the accumulated revenues?
I know it's more than like almost 500 billion.
The accumulated revenues.
Yes, Your Honor.
Is this 500 billion net of the reserve fund already? Is this net of the reserve fund?
The 500 billion revenue? No,
Yes.
no, Your Honor. So, the total accumulated revenue was around 500 billion, and then out of that 500 billion, 280.60 billion was set aside as reserve fund.
Okay.
So that left the 500 billion minus the 280 billion. That difference is the fund balance.
The fund balance.
But
Okay.
of that fund balance, which is like more than 200 billion, only 89.88 billion was required by the Department of Finance to be remitted by.
Okay, let's go to that later. Now, the 280 billion that is mentioned as the reserve fund of PhilHealth, who determines that?
It's determined by the PhilHealth Board, of course, but there is a recommendation from management, Your Honors.
Meaning, management probably computed by your Office of Actuary that could compute for the 2 years? What is the basis of the
management makes a recommendation and the PhilHealth Board approves, Your Honor.
Okay, how much was the recommendation made by by the management of the PhilHealth for purposes of reserve fund for 2024?
Oh, no. I have no info on that, Your Honor.
Can anybody from PhilHealth office or department answer this? Actually, please.
Oh. I have numbers here. I was provided numbers, Your Honors, but I think it doesn't respond to your question as to the number proposed by management.
Proposed by the actuary and if adopted by management and submitted to the board.
Well, the actuary only recommends, Your Honor.
Yes, but I want to know how much the actuary computed the ceiling corresponding to 2 years projected program expenditures.
Good afternoon, Your Honors.
Can I get your name, please?
Nerissa Santiago, the Acting Senior Vice President for the Actuarial Services and Risk Management Sector, Your Honor.
I'll repeat the question. For 2024, did you make any computation on the reserve fund, the ceiling, the ceiling corresponding to 2 years projected program expenditure for purposes of determination of the reserve fund?
Yes, Your Honor. During the December 31, 2023, we had a 2-year projected program expenditure set at 560 billion. That was the projected program expenditures for 2024 and 2025.
That was determined end of 2023.
Yes, that's correct, Your Honor.
So this 560
Billion,
is the ceiling corresponding to 2 years projected program expenditures.
Yes, that's correct, Your Honor.
After determining the 560 billion, what happened for purposes of looking at adoption by the board of the reserve fund?
That 560 billion is part of the footnotes in the financial statement and is, I'm not sure if it was included in the presentation, but it is part of the financial statement, Your Honor.
Okay. Apparently, as explained by earlier, this 560 billion that you recommended was reduced to 280 billion.
Yes, that's
Am I correct?
Your Honor. Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Your Honor.
So, why only, Mr. Counsel, why only 50%? 280 is 50% of 560. Why only 50% of the recommended amount did the board adopted as the reserve fund?
Actually, Your Honors, as you can see from Section 11, the requirement of actuarial estimate is only required for the ceiling.
Yes.
Not the reserve fund. So, where the actuary participated here was in setting the ceiling.
Yes, but you said earlier you have 220 billion excess. Your expenditures is accumulated revenues is 500 billion. The reserve fund is 280, and you still have 220 billion free funds. Why did the board merely agree or set the reserve fund 50% of the recommended amount?
the board has that discretion, Your Honor, to review the data and set the reserve fund to, and or even the ceiling to reasonable levels. Yeah.
Okay, now, earlier it was mentioned that the reserve fund for 2024 was, as recommended, was determined at the last day of 2023. When, am I correct? Yes. Now, when did the board adopted the reserve fund for 2024 in the amount of 280 billion? Was it supposed to be the beginning of the year of 2024 or any time as long as it is within the year 2024? Is there a board?
May, Your Honors, may I surmise an opinion, or I don't know how they call it. I think this is in response to the GAA provision and the DOF circular when the discussion on the 280 was discussed in the board, Your Honor.
No, you mentioned that you made a recommendation in the end of 2023 that the reserve fund for 2024 should be 560B, right? And I presume the board were sufficiently informed of this amount. When did the board of PhilHealth acted upon this amount to determine that the reserve fund should only be 280 billion? There should be at least a board resolution that would say that the reserve fund of PhilHealth is 280 billion.
I think the board acted around middle of last year, Your Honor. But yeah, by the way, previous to that, Your Honor, the board did not really, as I understand, I'm not really part of the management of PhilHealth, but the board never really formalized any level of reserve fund. So they simply followed an office order that was issued in 2012, where they set the reserve fund equal to or lower than the ceiling.
Did I hear it right that the board did not actually made a reservation for purposes of this reserve fund?
No, in the past, Your Honor. But this is an info I'm getting from the board staff of PhilHealth, Your Honor. But the board meeting for this new reserve fund that was approved was held May 8, 2024.
Can you provide us with the necessary documents to show, probably the board resolution, that on May 8, 2024, the PhilHealth board adopted a reserve fund in the amount of 280 billion?
We'll do that, Your Honor.
Can I get that commitment?
Yes, certainly, Your Honor.
Okay. Now, when the 560 billion, you computed it, you base this on 2 years projected expenditures, right?
That's correct, Your Honor.
On that basis, you came up with 560B.
That's correct, Your Honor.
And on that basis also, on May 8, the PhilHealth board adopted a reserve fund 50% as you recommended.
As stated, Your Honor. Yes.
Now let us go to, it was mentioned earlier that the amount requested by the Department of Finance, 89.9 billion, that was when it was sent to you that you need to transmit this amount. How did you go about it in PhilHealth? Was it immediately approved by PhilHealth? Did you have a discussion? What I mean is, under the GAA, it speaks of a reserve fund, right? Chapter GAA 2024, it speaks of a reserve fund. In Section 11 of the Universal Healthcare, also speaks of a reserve fund. Are these concepts the same or different from each other?
I think the reserve fund under the Universal Healthcare Act, Your Honor, has its own definition in the law.
Yes. In fact, under the Section 11, the reserve fund shall not exceed a ceiling equivalent to the amount actuarially estimated for 2 years projected program expenditures.
Yes.
So therefore, looking forward.
But
In the GAA, the reserve fund must be reduced to a reasonable level, taking into account disbursement from prior years. So therefore, the reserve fund under the GAA speaks of expenditures for prior years. So it speaks, these two concepts are different.
no, not really different, Your Honor.
Why do you say
that? You look at your past needs to, in a way, have a good guess of your future needs.
Again,
So
sorry.
you look at you look at your expenditures in the past to have a good estimate of your expenditures in the future.
Yes, that is the reserve fund for PhilHealth. You determine that by taking into consideration expenses projected for the next 2 years, which is
right.
necessarily, from experience, higher than expenditures for the past prior years. So therefore, the amounts for reserve fund, if you compute it under the PhilHealth, would be vastly different from the amount of reserve fund under the GAA. In that case, my question now is, how did you compute the amount if there are two different bases in determining the amount to be remitted to the Department of Finance?
I know they took the rolling 2-year average of the expenditures in the past, was it 5 years, Your Honor, from 2018 to 2023. They took the average of the rolling past 2 years.
Okay, now, when the GAA was passed, this provision on fund balance and the reserve fund, I'll read it to you. Fund balance of GOCCs from any remainder resulting from the review and reduction of that reserve fund to reasonable levels taking into account the disbursement from prior years. So, under the GAA, they have to determine a reserve fund, right? And the reserve fund is determined by taking into consideration expenses for prior years, right? Okay. Now, when DOF sent you a request to send the money, 89.9 billion, how did you interpret this provision in the GAA vis-a-vis your own concept of reserve fund under Section 11?
The PhilHealth, I know, has a manual of governance, Your Honor. So they went through a process pursuant to that manual. So one of the factors they considered is their absorptive capacity to spend. And that was based on the past years. I think they took the period from 2018 to 2023.
Who computed the amount of 89.9 billion?
That was the request from DOF, Your Honors.
Yes, precisely.
Yeah,
so it was it from DOF that the amount of 89.9 billion came from?
I believe so, Your Honor. After
Okay.
they have determined that 89.9 billion is outside the reserve fund. It will come from the fund.
Can I
balance.
get somebody from DOF to explain to the court how this 89.9 billion came from?
Your Honors, Deputy Treasurer Ed Marino from the Bureau of the Treasury, representing the Secretary of Finance in the Board of PhilHealth. The question is the calculation of the 89.9 billion.
How did you determine the 89.9 billion?
That is the unutilized subsidies as reflected in the unutilized government subsidies of PhilHealth for the years 2021 until 2023 as reflected in the financial statements of those years, Your Honor.
What do you mean by unutilized subsidy?
So in every year, Your Honor, from 2021 to 2023, there is a premium subsidy that was recorded in the financial statements of PhilHealth coming from the national government. And correspondingly, the accounting systems of PhilHealth can track the beneficiaries, the indirect contributor beneficiaries, where these subsidies must be used for. And we simply subtracted for each year the difference between the premium subsidies and the benefit expenses for indirect contributors.
So, since you contributed this much for 2021, 2022, 2023 representing subsidy from indirect contributors, those that were unspent or were not spent were taken back. That's what you're saying.
That is the basis of the 89.9 billion, Your Honor.
Okay. Now, however, under the GAA, this 89.9 billion, you will definitely tell me that this is part of the fund balance.
Yes, Your Honor. The 89.9 billion is part of the balance which is on top of the reserves, the reasonable reserves, Your Honor.
Yes. But under the circular, Department Circular 003/2024, there were guidelines that were provided for determining fund balance.
Yes, Your Honor.
Can you tell me where in these guidelines, or what were the basis? Because in determining fund balance, it said here in 4.3, the reasonable level of reserve fund shall be computed by the DOF on a case-to-case, case-by-case basis, considering the following factors. It enumerated the factors, and I presume you know these factors. Now, you mentioned to me earlier that the amount 89.9 billion represents the balance of the subsidy. Where in these guidelines or basis was the basis for taking up 89.9 representing this unspent subsidy?
Your Honor, I believe those one of the considerations highlighted there is the ability, is actually the spending capacity of PhilHealth, both in the past and the projected expenditures. So that is the primary basis. That is why we took a look at the financial statements of PhilHealth. Moreover, the fund balance takes the form of cash in bank, and other investment securities. So that's the form included in the circular, Your
Yes,
Honor.
but I went through this 4.3. I do not see the basis for taking the subsidy, the unspent subsidy, as the 89.9 billion. Do you have a copy of Department Circular?
Your Honor, if I may just get a copy. Sir, if I may, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
Letter A of 4.3 states here, historical performance, including the absorptive capacity, which presents the actual financial performance versus the approved budget, regular and recurring operating expenses, including non-cash expenses, the legal claims and obligations, etc. Unutilized, and number K, unutilized subsidies and fund transfers for programs and projects, Your Honor.
So, by taking the unspent subsidy, you're referring to A and B?
Okay. So the unutilized subsidy specifically is in K, 4.3K, Your Honor.
4.3K.
Yes.
Okay. So it refers to when you took the 89 point when DFS requested the 89.9, it represents the unutilized subsidies.
Yes, Your Honor.
When you speak of subsidies that were given to PhilHealth on 2021, 22, and 2023, why do you consider that unutilized? Because PhilHealth is a going concern. And in fact, I understand for 2025, no subsidy was allotted to PhilHealth. So why would you consider it to be unutilized subsidy?
Yes, Your Honor, if I may. Number one, for the past years, even for the years 2021, 2022, and 2023, PhilHealth consistently receives premium subsidies in the GAA. It was the case in 2024. They were allocated about 40 billion in the 2024 GAA, and in 2025, the executive proposed, I think, in the NEF of about 80 billion in subsidies. So the reason, Your Honor, is because consistently the government, when DOF computed or evaluated the fund balance, the national government has demonstrated the capacity, the willingness to continuously provide subsidies to PhilHealth. And of course, the mechanism in Section 37, the last paragraph, says that the DOH and PhilHealth can provide the necessary, can request the subsidies to help it achieve the goals of the Universal Healthcare Act. So it's a continuous flow, Your Honor.
Yes, precisely. So the fact that PhilHealth could not spend this amount for benefits, and the national government will take this amount to fund and program expenditures, the fault is on PhilHealth for not spending this. It is not for the government to take this away and for PhilHealth to expand its program, so that the subsidies that were allocated by government for healthcare should not be taken away. Instead of directing the DOF, the national government, directing PhilHealth, "Oy, PhilHealth, gastusin niyo ito para sa taong bayan," kinuha ninyo at binigay sa iba. This is precisely the meat of this case. So, why is PhilHealth, therefore, not expanding their benefits and programs that would approximate the subsidies that were given to them to answer for the health benefits of our people?
Your Honor, if I may. So this is, of course, based on the discussions with management and my experience in the deliberation of the board. But fundamentally, PhilHealth faces structural absorptive capacity issue. What does that mean? The benefits, and expansion of benefits is only one part of the equation. To accomplish the objectives of the Universal Healthcare Act, the national government also needs to address what we term as the supply side constraints, supply side issues. So ano po ba ito, Your Honor? So number one, the insufficiency of the compensation for our healthcare workers or healthcare professionals. Number two, hospitals, healthcare facilities. Even if there is even if benefit expansions occur, if there is no hospital within the vicinity of a specific beneficiary, particularly an indigent beneficiary, then they will not be able to avail of these expanded benefits. So there needs to be the supply side constraints. And of course, in addition to the direct health supply side health constraints, so yung hospitals po, yung medical equipment, and of course the personnel, the health care workers, you also have the WHO also has this term called the social determinants of health. So those are the other things. Those are the other things that help improve health outcomes. So what are these?
these things that you mentioned, absorptive capacity, so supply side issues, this can also be addressed by government. You're getting money from PhilHealth and telling us that PhilHealth lacks absorptive capacity. But the reason why it lacks absorptive capacity because it doesn't get full support from government, not only addressing expanding benefit, but also supply side requirements. So you're just providing an excuse to get this money out of PhilHealth. No, when you speak of limitations in hospitals, I mean, you can inquire from our people, repeated complaints that they cannot even get PhilHealth benefits. And if they get PhilHealth benefits, it's so low that it cannot even cover substantially the amount expenses or medical expenses. So people will not understand the issue of absorptive capacity or supply side demand or requirements. So on the issue of why do you need to take this amount if the blame should be on PhilHealth because it could not provide for these benefits?
Your Honor, if I may. So after the order or the instruction to return the 89.9 billion, we have seen last year that PhilHealth has significantly accelerated the pace of a benefit expansion, and they will continue to provide more benefits this year. So the issue in terms of the expansion of benefits is steadily being addressed.
Precisely, that PhilHealth increases its benefits because of public criticism arising from this, trying to get the 89.9 billion. They are now probably justifying, oh, we can do this. In fact, we're increasing the amount. Without public backlash, probably, I don't know if PhilHealth will increase its benefits.
That may be so, Your Honor, but all the same, I think for the Department of Finance, for the economic managers, what matters to us is the expansion of benefits. If there must be a stick that must be presented together with a carrot, then we should, I think we are happy if we see more benefits for the Filipino people.
Okay, now let us now go to the collection, the subsidy. The subsidy that were given to PhilHealth were taken from the taxes, as mentioned earlier by Justice Ami, taxes from PAGCOR, etc. Now, when the budget for PhilHealth subsidy from government, how do you compute the proposal of PhilHealth for subsidy from government? Let us say for 2024, so may budget call noong 2023. PhilHealth will have to prepare a budget, a request. For purposes of determining the subsidy that will be contributed by the government, what is your basis in determining the subsidy? Proposal to be submitted to the Office of the President for NEP.
Your Honor, if I may, I believe the exact process would be most familiar to DBM, but if you can allow me my basic understanding of the process. So PhilHealth, during the budget deliberation period, they submit a proposed budget, and this proposed budget includes, number one, the number of beneficiaries.
No, initially, sa NEP pa lang. For purposes of preparing the NEP, the PhilHealth will submit to the Office of the President a budget. Part of that budget is the amount of subsidy for indirect contributors. How much do you ask for, and what was the basis for this amount?
Your Honor, if I may, I'm not familiar on the exact amount, but in terms of the process, I know I am to the best of my knowledge, the proposal of PhilHealth is put together with DOH. So it's a DOH budget submitted to DBM for evaluation.
No, the reason why I ask this, we have laws that allocate funds to answer for the subsidy of government to PhilHealth. Mentioned earlier, sin taxes, etc., etc. Now, do you know the actual collection of government corresponding to these taxes? And if you have computed this amount, do these equal to the amount PhilHealth requested Office of the President for purposes of subsidy for indirect contributors?
Your Honor, I do not have with me the exact certifications.
I need to get an answer to this because this is in relation to the question of a special fund. Yung collection ng gobyerno sa mga taxes, PAGCOR, etc., for the year, ito rin ba ang hiningi ng PhilHealth sa Office ng President para doon sa subsidy ng indirect contributors? For me, it should be the same amount.
I believe our colleagues from PhilHealth or probably DOH would be in a better position to answer this on the exact amounts, Your Honor.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. Assistant Secretary Albert Domingo from the Department of Health.
Yes, please.
Thank you, Your Honor. To the question on how the PhilHealth computes its request for a budget, it does not refer to the computation on the syntax allocation. Instead, it counts the number of members based on a database. There is a database on indirect members, and then it generates a list. It enumerates the number. The exact number escapes me now, but this is the process. And then that number is submitted, multiplied by a factor, which is the premium rate, and then it is submitted to the Department of
So
Budget
therefore,
Management.
when you come up with your budget request for the subsidy, you don't actually consider the taxes being collected that Congress passed for purposes of subsidy for indirect contributors.
That is correct, Your Honor. The budget is computed based on the need.
So you're not following the law? You're not observing what the law requires?
Your Honor, budget principles require that it's needs-based. If we will follow it based on the projected fund ceiling or availability, it might not match certain
Yes,
things.
I agree. It's based on needs. But the problem there is PhilHealth limits the funding so that you don't address the needs, the health needs of the Filipino people. If you increase budget 200%, and I don't think the Filipino would not avail of that. You define your own limits. The Congress allocates budget or collects taxes, provides for collection of taxes to answer for the subsidy of PhilHealth for indirect contributors. Now, when you request money for subsidy, ang ibig mong sabihin, hindi mo papakailam yun? Hindi mo naiintindihin yun? Gagawa ka ng sarili mong formula because you have limited understanding there's a limited need of our people for health.
Your Honor, the current administration agrees with your observation, which is why this particular case under litigation has been the signal it has been using to increase the benefits. Ang tagal na po, 10 taon.
So therefore, if the current administration recognizes that, very thank you. And therefore, they should bring back the money back to PhilHealth.
Your Honor, the reason why the administration recognized it because for the longest time, the corporation has thought it will always get money because of the guarantee of the syntax.
Oh, precisely, whatever would be, whatever is that. As long as the government recognizes now, it is now incumbent on the part of the government to return the 60 billion that was transmitted already because it recognized now. Hindi lang na-recognize probably before, ngayon na-recognize na. So therefore, when you recognize it, you should return it. What do you think?
Your Honor, if it pleases the court, Section 58, the sovereign guarantee, even without this maneuver of the 89.9, government can and always will increase the benefits. But the signal, Your Honor, if it pleases the court, that this litigation gave is a strong signal for it to do so.
So I wish the court, the people, should now be satisfied by a strong signal from the administration.
Your Honor, it's not necessarily the administration. It is the fact that the reserves, the
You
amounts...
said the government.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So a strong signal from the government to help PhilHealth and expand benefit should now be enough for our people to rely on.
This is the start, Your Honor. If the case is allowed to proceed, if the transfer is allowed to proceed, it is a use it or lose it signal, which all national government agencies have, so that we will use our funds. GOCCs like PhilHealth do not have that signal, and they think, at least before the current CEO or the current administration, they think that just because there is an earmark, whether hard or soft, that they will get the money, and there is no stimulus for them to actually increase the benefits.
When you prepare this budget of yours for subsidy, why did you not consider the collection made by government, by BIR, on the sin taxes? What was the reason behind that?
Your Honor, mathematically, it's the premium rate. The way that the premium rate is determined, unfortunately, is not actuarially fair. It is not based on the spread of benefits that is due the Filipino people. Kulang po talaga yung binabayad ng PhilHealth. 10% lamang po in 2024. Kaya dapat po talaga taasan. And mathematically, the only way to do this is to increase the benefit packages, which we are doing now.
But the government collected taxes already, representing supposedly the subsidy. Why would government not transmit everything to PhilHealth as originally intended?
That is correct, Your Honor. Unfortunately, the receptacle to which this money can be transmitted cannot handle the amount of money because it's too small.
So if it is correct, and the reason why it was not transmitted because of administrative matters or hindrances, you agree that this should go to PhilHealth. It's a matter of spending it. So therefore, when government merely allocated this amount, probably substantially lower from the taxes that were collected, all of the balance should be given to PhilHealth this year and prior years. It's just a matter of administrative absorption. Hindi lang kaya gastusin ng PhilHealth. Kung hindi kaya gastusin ng PhilHealth, ibigay sa PhilHealth at utusan ng PhilHealth, oy, taasan ninyo ang benefits nyo. Hoy, mag-hire kayo ng mga tao ninyo para magastos ito para sa health ng ating tao.
Your Honor, if I may, 3 presidente na po ng Republika ang dumaan simula noong 2013 hanggang 2023. At siguro mahigit 10 mga presidente ng korporasyon. Ganun po lagi ang utos pero hindi po nangyayari until now.
Probably it's time to overhaul PhilHealth and change the board for not complying what the law requires. Hindi kasalanan ng tao yan for not availing all of these benefits. Apparently from your own words, kasalanan niya ng administrasyon, this administration, last administration, or the previous administration. At kasalanan niya ng PhilHealth Board. Huwag natin pahirapan yung tao because nandyan naman yung pera. The money is there. Government will not giving it to PhilHealth to serve as health benefits for our people.
If I may, Your Honor, in fact, nung una pong oral arguments, iba po yung PCEO na humarap sa korting ito. At nung ikalawang oral arguments, ganun ho kabilis, iba na ho uli yung humarap na CEO. Kino-correct na po.
Okay, so that's maybe a good point from PhilHealth, but we cannot close our eyes for the past years na hindi nabigay in benefits. So in that case, maybe PhilHealth can already request the President to return the money, the 60 billion that were transmitted to PhilHealth, to the government for UNCRO program funds. Ibalik na yan sa PhilHealth and PhilHealth to expand its benefits, hire more people to answer for the needs of the health of our people. That will be all. Thank you.
Thank you, Justice